question, I'll be in here afterwards, and you can ask me any question that you might be interested in or want to have a discussion about the topics tonight or other topics. I'll just be available to answer any questions you may have. If something comes out of tonight and you have questions, please feel free to email me or call me. I do appreciate getting those calls. I've had some great conversations after these evenings, and I think it's really important in moving us forward. So like I was mentioning, we're really now shifting. We had our first meeting about the Common Core, kind of laying the foundation. Last meeting we talked about the assessment that's going on, our new assessment. But what we really need to start moving into is how are we moving as a district? How are we collaborating as a parent group with a school group and working together to actually move our kids forward? And this is where we're going to see our meetings start to change. There's going to be a lot more input from you because we're going to start making some decisions. Our next meeting, our April 8th meeting, is about enrichment and gifted and talented, and we're really going to I'm looking for feedback from you about what types of programs you're interested in and what your experiences have been, because that's going to guide what we're planning for next year. So moving forward, we're going to have a lot more input from parents, and I really do appreciate comments that you make, questions you have, and discussions we have beyond even the evening, because it will guide what programs we're looking at for in the future. Student learning to me is like this three-legged stool. We cannot exist with any of these legs we're missing. It would fall over and student learning can't take place. It's important that we have the parent group and the school group as well as the student input themselves. And up to this point, my experiences have been that Denville is a very engaged community. We have volunteers coming into the building. We have people coming to the evening events. We have them participating in doing the activities outside of school and then coming and watching their students perform in school. And we call those engaged parents. Whether you're asking them what's going on in their day at the kitchen table, or you're doing things with them on the weekend, that's an engagement piece. And we're looking at how do we build upon that and shift the focus from not how do we get more parents in the school, because we really have that. We have a lot of parents interested in being a part of their children's lives beyond their home life. Now we're looking at how do we support parents at home? What can we be giving you that can help them with their learning and guide them? And we're not talking about more homework, like how do you do more work? It's how do you make the most of the time that you have, that you spend doing any academic pieces, how you guide them when they're doing their reading, independent reading, or if they're doing writing journals, or if they're out on field trips, how do you engage with them and make that more meaningful? And then shifting to that, a more collaborative partnership, we're really looking at supporting the children's learning as well as their overall well-being. And to do that, we have to become more familiar with each other's world. So that means bringing parents in, understanding the school lingo and the things that we're doing here, so that at home you can actually build upon the things that we're doing here. But we also need to know what's going on in your homes, or what are the important things to you, so that we can be building upon them here in school. And questions that I've been thinking about is, well, how do we do that? How do we build those partnerships? And I'm looking at how are we effectively opening the doors to each other, like meetings like tonight, or other ways from you. If you have ideas of how can we get those doors open so that we can better foster what's going on at home and what's going on here at school. And how might we interact together so that we can learn from you and you can learn from us? How do we build from a position of asset and acceptance of things that we're doing here, and things that might be not programs that we don't have, but ways that we can bring it in. Because we know that we have a lot of great things going on in the school district, a lot of great things going on at home and in the community, and want to build on those together. And in what ways can we build on the strengths and interests of not only the students and parents, but also the staff? How can we build on those relationships? So moving forward, I'm very interested in hearing what you think of ideas that we have. So that we have our conversation cafes, we're developing how we want to move forward. Yes?
Excuse me for interrupting.
Sure, Dave.
How can we build from a position of asset and acceptance?
That we look at the assets that we have and how can we go beyond that. All the things that are already great here in our school district, but also at home, and build beyond that, not moving from a place of deficit. Because we really aren't, we're not moving from a place of Denville that we're coming up with filling deficits in children's homes. We're really building on all the great things that are going on at home, and how can we build on that and seeing as the assets that you're sending your students to school with. And then the acceptance of really accepting how things are changing and how can we look at the future for our students. What are they going to have to do in 15 years and moving into universities and colleges and careers, and how to prepare them for that, and understanding that, accepting that change is going to occur, and for us also accepting that there are changes in family structures, cultures, information that we're getting, and just making the most of those things. And finally, it's just really about student learning. So I like this quote, that schools have a very important role in helping parents learn the language of schooling so that the parents can provide every possible assistance to their children. I think that's a big part of it, is that we may be on the same wavelength of what we want for our children, both as students and as your children, but the language barrier sometimes becomes just that, a barrier. That we aren't using the same language, and sometimes it seems like we have differences, but really it's the same. Education is famous for changing the lingo up every few years, and it isn't helpful to families of understanding. And the more we are on the same wavelength, the more our students, we can raise our expectations and the better the students can do. So this evening, what we have prepared is that in these breakout sessions, they're going to be showing you different resources, but also different techniques and strategies and things to make learning fun at home. Again, it's not about how do you give kids more homework. They'll have you ask them questions. They'll give you some other apps and different tools that you can use. I think there's some hands-on components in all of the sessions for you this evening. So I think what we do, so since we have the mix, how many people, let's just split it up. Going into the K2, and those of you that are just going to 3-5, go ahead and go to that one first. And if you're just going to K2, go there first. And the rest of you can sort of pick if you want to go to K2 or 3-5, and 6 to 8, you're going to stay here. And 6 to 8 will only be offered this first session, so if you want to hear 6 to 8, stay here. Yeah.
K2 and 3-5
Well, now you can choose, because you're not involved. Yeah. The library is, the K2 library looks like that might be the smallest group, so you might want to. And 6 to 8, come on up to the front.
I'll talk first.
Because there is something that you will talk to them about anyway, with what they can do at home, and then we'll go to the
Absolutely.
okay?
Our two presenters for 6 to 8 tonight is Jack.
Hi,
Who is our middle school. She does the gifted and talented. She does basic skills. She's done language arts. She has a lot of experience at the middle school. And then Jen Conforte, who's also spoken at the other two sessions, is our math specialist coming tonight. She is stuck in that terrible traffic with our presentation. So Mrs. Jaffe's going to start tonight, and then we'll take over when she gets here.
Hi.
Yes, so, yeah.
3 to 5, will be on again at the same time?
You'll be on the second time.
Or after 6, when they can go to 3 to 5?
Yes,
Perfect.
and one of them was.
Okay, so let's talk, okay? The most important thing, do you have any of your children, by the way? And who's your daughter?
My daughter is Christine Carter, she's in high school.
Oh my God, oh, I love it. And do I have your child?
Kate Fitzsimmons?
Oh, sure, I do in my expo right now. She's delicious.
Nisha Hamish.
I have Michelle now. Oh, she's actually there together. Terrific. Okay, so then we'll meet again for expo. I want to talk to you. And actually, because I do know the 3 children, not one of the 3 has an issue with writing, but I want to talk about writing. Because it's crazy what goes on, even with us adults, okay? And with the texting and the instant messaging and everything else, we lose sight of writing. If you leave here with one thing from me tonight, it has to be that everything needs to be read out.
Any children in kindergarten or? Okay, fantastic. And how is?
Mrs. Eisenstadt.
Oh,
Yeah.
I don't think I've met you. What's?
No, I'm Gretchen Brown. My son is Henry.
Okay, I don't think I know Henry yet,
Yeah.
but how is he doing
He
this
knows
year?
of you, Miss Morgan.
Okay, all right.
That's a good thing,
Miss
right?
Morgan's class, yes.
Oh, well, we're neighbors, so
Your
that's
neighbors, yes.
probably why.
Exactly.
Wonderful. So he's doing well this year. He's
It's going well.
okay. Good. Good to hear that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm interested to hear sort of about where we should be at. I think that would be, and sort of to what extent we should be encouraging them at home to keep reading. You know, you want them to do it, but you want them to like it too, right?
And that's
Exactly.
like our big, honestly, that's our big takeaway tonight. Like I have, like, my daughter's 5. She's doing like a pre-kindergarten program.
Mhm.
And so the other night, I'm like, every night I'm like, we have to read, 10 minutes, put on a
Right.
reading log,
Yeah.
I'm like, I set the timer on the kitchen timer, and she's like, not into it at all. And I realized it's me, because I'm not making it fun for her. I'm not interacting with her in a way that is going to make her want, to read the book, to get to the page that we can talk
Right.
about. And I think that's really, I'm going to just start.
Yes,
I think
Yeah.
that's really our big takeaway from tonight, is that we just want you to know that whatever you're doing to support your children at home, whether it be in literacy or in math, it's key, especially at this age, K to 2, for them to really love it, to have fun. So it's like having fun with books, with words, with numbers, because that excitement, we want them to carry that back into the schools as well. And like Dr. Collins was saying, it's really, it's about partnering with you to maintain that natural curiosity that I think is readily prevalent in K to 2 children. It's like the early years, they're so excited about learning and coming to school. So that's kind of our big idea, is just to have fun with whatever it is that you're doing to support your children. So I gave you a little bit of our background, and as far as how we're going to conduct the session, I know we have any other kindergarten parents, or you guys are okay, kindergarten, okay, first grade, second grade, okay. So we're going to kind of give you an overview of some different things on our PowerPoint, and then we want you to kind of feel free to get up, walk around the room. We have a whole bunch of different things for you to kind of explore, and take, like I said, take whatever you want and whatever you feel relevant, and ask us any questions that you may have. So I know that, one of the things that they were talking about in some of the earlier sessions of the Parent Academy is the Common Core, and really what the big idea is about the Common Core. I think in terms of reading, it's really about a couple different things. First, really balancing their reading diet, meaning exposing them not only to fiction, but to nonfiction as well. The expectation is really that they have an equal balance between informational reading and regular, literary reading. And in addition to that, balance, we also want to give them practice talking about books, writing about books, and most importantly, whatever they're talking about, really we want them to find evidence to support their ideas or support their thinking. So, for example, like, if you're talking with your child about a character in a book and they say to you, oh, I think that they're feeling sad here, well, why? And not just, oh, because, I think so. It's, okay, let's go back and find the words that might have led you to believe that. Maybe the evidence isn't something the character said, maybe the evidence isn't a picture, but just kind of tying it always back to the actual text or the actual reading that they're doing. In terms of nonfiction, what's the author trying to teach you here? Well, the author's trying to teach me about, how frogs, live in ponds. Well, where's the evidence? Is it in a diagram? Is it in the actual writing? Is it in a chart? So always kind of bringing it back to the text. And then, and once again, just building their knowledge through, a variety of different nonfiction reading. Now, nonfiction reading doesn't necessarily have to be just books. We can talk about magazines. We have resources for you that are available through the school to do online reading for nonfiction. But those are basically the key shifts in terms of reading and writing K to 2. I put the quote up here by Emily, because I just think that's so true, is that, children are really made readers on the laps of their parents. When you think about the joy that you had holding your child when they're little and, sharing that book, that's really when the love of reading is born. And when we talk about reading, we're talking really specifically about 3 different components. Decoding, which is the reading of the words on the page, or the breaking down of the words that Ms. Galuccio is going to talk about in a few minutes. Comprehension, which is really making meaning from the text. And then fluency, which supports comprehension. But fluency is really how quickly or how many words correct per minute is your child reading, or their rate of reading. And I'll talk a little bit more about how to help your child with fluency, but also why it's important for them to be fluent readers in a few minutes. So you probably might be wondering, where are some places to find good books? When you're looking for good books, you want to look in two different lenses. One is like book lists that might be recommended books by various different websites, authors, but you also want to look through the lens of finding leveled text as well. I think it's really important for parents to know that, you know, your child may be a level C reader in school, but that doesn't define who they are. You want to expose your child to a variety of different texts. It might mean that you're reading to them as opposed to them reading to you, but you want to give them that exposure. So you'll see in a few minutes when we kind of walk around, there's examples of all the levels from kindergarten through second grade, so you can see the text levels over there. I also have a handout that kind of describes how, you know, what to expect at each you know, guided reading level, and also questions that you can ask that would pertain to those particular levels. And the other thing to keep in mind about reading levels is that as teachers, you know, we're very passionate about books and reading and loving reading. And I think, you know, we want children to progress through levels, but it's not a race. It's not a reading race where, you know, they're an A now and they're a B now and they're a C now. And you know, you want them to be on grade level, but you also want to make sure that they're reading widely. So you might have a reader that's more of an advanced reader for their grade level. So what you want to keep in mind then is exposing them to a variety of genres. So you might read a mystery book. You might read, you know, a historical fiction book. You might read a biography. You want to kind of mix it up because that's going to build that wide range of knowledge that we talked about on the first slide. The other thing about, you know, reading levels to keep in mind too, and I don't know if parents are always aware of this, is the idea that as the levels advance, the content becomes more complicated, and the themes become more complicated. And so, you know, as a second grade teacher, when I'm teaching students up, you know, to level NM, beyond that, you know, some of the themes that might be introduced, they're not maybe developmentally ready for, maybe they're not even getting it. Like there's levels of, you know, understanding. I was even reading a book with them recently, and it was a level L, and there were some subtle things that were happening, like the character's voice trailed off, and she looked out the window, and the kids we were reading it together, and they didn't notice that, and we had to go back and talk about, you know, what does that mean when somebody's voice is trailing off, or they're looking at the window, or maybe it means that they're thinking, or maybe it means that, you know, they're reflecting on something that's maybe not too happy, or, you know, that kind of thing. So the thing about level text, you want to keep that lens, but you also want to make sure that you are aware of the content in the books that are in the upper levels. And another resource for great books is just online reading. We have a handout over there that kind of is all the online databases that you have access to as, you know, Denville residents. And basically, there's two really great ones, which I'm not sure if parents use as much at home. Bookflix, which pairs fiction and nonfiction texts together. Usually one of them is like a story come to life, but then the words are there so they're exposed to the text. And then usually the nonfiction one, I think they read it out loud to you, but you can turn that feature on and off. And the other great database is TrueFlix, and that has all nonfiction or all informational reading in a variety of different subjects.
Yeah, that in the handout.
Yeah, all of the handouts that I'm talking about are back over there. What did I do?
I think it's while you're checking about, you mentioned reading to them.
Yes.
You know, because I have a 6-year-old, also a 4-year-old, and they both really still like, I mean, I'm still reading to them
Yes,
a lot.
that's perfect.
A lot.
It's wonderful.
Like
That's
even
what,
novel,
yes,
it's much longer,
yes.
we just do a chapter at
Yes.
a time. Okay.
That's fantastic. I just started reading with my daughter Raggedy Ann and Andy, like their adventures from way back when. And
Yeah.
the book is like crusty old, but
Yeah.
every night she's excited. She
Right.
wants to read because, again, it's that they want time with you. They want that closeness. And when you're together like that, that kind of leads to the things that I'm going to talk about now. It's about having conversations. You know, when you're reading together, it shouldn't feel like an interview when they're done with a book. And I think sometimes, and I'm guilty of it too. Who's the character? You know, what was the setting? What happened? Retell it to me. You know, those kinds of things. And then it's like, this is not fun. They want to talk with you about the book. I think that, you know, doing simple things like family reading night, you know, maybe having a couple kids in your neighborhood do a book club, that kind of thing. Those are fun, engaging ways to get students excited or children excited about reading, where they don't even realize how much practice they're getting, not just in the reading itself, but also in the speaking about text, which we talked about. And then to push it even further, you can write then. You can keep a little book journal. You know, what are your favorite parts in this book? Use, you know, Post-it notes. Post-it the page that is your favorite page, whether you read it to them or they're reading on their own. And so in terms of book talks, you know, one of the things to keep in mind is that in addition to just, you know, kind of talking about the books while you're reading, you want to always be sharing books that you might read together in the future, like build that excitement. And tap into things they're already interested in. If your child's really interested in sports, there's, you know, nonfiction sports books, but there's also fiction. You know, there's sports characters and fictional books as well. And I just love Dr. Seuss, so fill your house with stacks of books. And all the fans of the next, let me just look over. Okay. So in terms of comprehension, on the other side, I just wanted to mention to you briefly. There's two different bookmarks over here. One of them is about retelling. And I'd mentioned to you guys about the idea that, you know, when you're done with a book, you want to make sure they understand what they read, but you don't want it to seem like an interview. So that's our yellow bookmark. You can just fold it in half and cut it out or just use it like this. But there's some suggestions on here about how to make retelling fun. And also there's some suggestions in here for reading informational text with your children. It's back there, it's the blue one. But just questions to ask to guide those conversations. The third component about reading that I mentioned in my first slide is the idea of fluency. And I just kind of like the little excerpt from the Reading Mother because it kind of ties to what you said. The most important thing about, you know, fluency is the idea that it's not about reading really quickly. It's kind of like riding a bicycle. You can't ride a bicycle too quickly, you'll fall off. If you ride a bicycle too slowly, you're going to fall off as well. And the meaning is lost when that happens when you're reading. If you read too quickly, you're not going to understand it. If you read too slowly, you're not going to understand it. So there's some suggestions here on the slide to improve fluency. Echo reading is simply the idea of I'm going to read like a sentence, 2 sentences. I'm going to read it. You're going to hear me model it. You're going to hear me read it fluently, paying attention to punctuation. And then you, as the child, you're going to echo it back. Choral reading is you read it together. And then the other thing I have up there is the idea of you read to me, I'll read to you, which is a series that's out over there. You can take a look. Oh, actually, it's right over here. This is great because there's a whole series like this, and it's like talking about cozying up with books. The text is divided so that you read one side, the child reads the other side, and then when you get to the end, you read it together. But my favorite thing to do to improve students' fluency is to work with poetry. I think that poetry lends itself to fluency. Practice, because it's short texts, they're often rhyming. But again, to challenge your students and to kind of tap into students that maybe are reading at a more advanced level, poetry exposes them to great word choice. They don't have to be rhyming poems. You can have poems that are not rhyming. You can talk about, you know, what is the poet really telling you here. And I have a variety of different poetry books out for you to take a look at, as well as a bookmark that talks specifically about fluency and some of the ways to help with fluency at home. One of the things that's really critical to understand about fluency is students need to be able to read the words, not just break them down, but also to know their trick words or their sight words. And that's what Ms. Galuccio is going to be talking a little bit more about. So I'm going to hand it over to her. Okay.
If you have a child in K-2, you know that they're using the Foundations program, and that's our word study program. And word study is a really important component of the balanced literacy program that your children are part of every day. It's just a small piece of the day, but it's really what's going to help them become fully literate. You know, they need to recognize words quickly. They also need to write words to convey meaning. So by playing with words, it's going to help them grow in both these areas. And Foundations is called Foundations because it's supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be playing with words. It's supposed to be building words, pulling them apart. You know, it's not, here's your list of spelling words to memorize and spit out to me, and then they're forgotten the next day. The great thing about Foundations, like I said, it is used K-2, so it's a nice consistent program that the kids will get every year. And it helps them with reading, with the decoding piece, but it also helps them with encoding, which is the spelling piece. So kids learn, you know, to see a letter and produce a sound, but then also to hear a sound and produce the letters. That's the encoding and the decoding piece. In all the grades, the kids have the sound cards. And this really helps the visual learners because every letter has a picture that goes with it, and then that can help them remember the sound. So if there's like, oh, letter T always gets them every time, and they can remember T, top, T. They remember that keyword top, and then they say, oh yes, T. So this is gonna help them when they're reading and they see the letter T, and they're like, oh, what's it say? Oh, top, T. Or when they're spelling and they're trying to write the word time in their really great story, you know, they'll hopefully go back to that picture. So as a resource for you guys, I know, like, one of the greatest things the kids, you know, sounds are the building block of writing and reading, so it's really important that they master their sounds. So for the kindergarten parents, I have just a little handout that has all the sounds that they're expected to master by the end of the year. It's the consonants, the short vowels, and the digraphs. And this, you know, if you find your child isn't mastering these yet, like at this time of the year, it would just be good to practice those words at home, those sounds at home. You can just drill them, like we actually say, A, apple, ah, and then they repeat us, A, apple, ah, and they can make their dog say A, apple, ah, and they can make you say it, and then, you know, like make a game, make their brother say it, or sister, or whatever. So try and keep it fun. I have the same handout for first grade, but it gets obviously more complicated. You know, we expect when they come into first grade that they have their consonants and short vowels and digraphs in place, and then they learn their glued sounds, which are basically like word families and like chunks of words, so that they're not sitting there and like, when it's an I and K, they're not like I, n, k. They just say I and K, pink, ink. So they learn it as a chunk. So when they're reading, they find chunks, and it helps them become more fluent, like Miss Jameson was saying, but also with their spelling. The other new thing that they'll learn in first grade is their long vowel sounds. And they learn it in the vowel consonant E syllable. I'm going to talk about syllables in a moment. And then for second grade, things get a little crazy. You're second grade, you're first grade. It gets very complicated in second grade because they have to come in with all those things I just mentioned, and then they learn about all the different syllables in our language. And when I say syllables, you're probably like, wait a second, syllables are like 2 syllables and one, and that is the way we learn syllables, and that is what a syllable is. It's a push of air in a word. But in our language, there's 6 types of syllables. So we explicitly teach the kids about these types of syllables so that when they're reading, like if they're in 4th grade and they come in the reading a nonfiction text and they come to a really complicated content area word, they should be able to break it down by the syllables that they learned in 1st and 2nd grade. Because in kinder they mostly just do the closed syllable, like the CVC words like cat, and sit, and hat, and so on. But the hope is that when they get to those more complicated words, they'll be able to break it down by syllables to decode it. The hope is also that they'll be able to break words down by syllables to spell. So in 2nd grade, the way it kind of works is we spend a lot of weeks with each syllable. And the first week or 2, it's just, we just talk about like 1-syllable words that follow that pattern. So for example, like R-controlled syllables are things like, and they all go back to these cards, which is really nice. Like AR, car, R. So we know when we see AR and we're trying to read, AR says R. Similar when we're spelling and we hear R, we know it's, you know, AR. But then we learn about syllables. So we learn like, okay, now I'm trying to spell the word tardy. So for the first syllable, it's tar, so we just break it down, T-R. And then the second syllable is D, and that's what we call an open syllable. And I know it sounds like crazy to you because you didn't learn that way, but the kids actually are really good at identifying syllables and words. I know that's one of my, like as a 2nd grade teacher, parents ask about syllables all the time because it is another language and it is confusing. And as much as I'd love to talk to you all about syllables all night, you're going to just look at me like, what is she talking about? So I have a syllable breakdown. It's like your syllable Bible. So especially like for the kinder parents and first, like take this because when your kids are in 2nd grade, this is going to help you. It explains what each syllable is. It explains the spelling rules that go with that syllable. Because the whole philosophy with the foundations is we're teaching a rule and a pattern. We're not just giving them a list of words to memorize. So once they internalize these rules and patterns, then they're going to be able to spell anything here and hopefully decode like any words you give them. So this is a good handout from the Having Fun with Covered Words table. And then your knowledge too of the sounds and of the syllables will help you be able to help them when they're reading, like when they're decoding and they get to a word and you notice like, the word tardy, you can say like, isn't that an R controlled, like, AR, car, R. So if you have the knowledge at home of the sound cards that I showed you, or of the types of syllables, it's gonna help you be able to help them at reading time. Because one question parents always ask me is like, do I just tell them the word when they're stuck? And it's hard, because if it's a word they can break down into code based on what you know they're learning in class, then you do want to try and have them, figure it out. We do have a little bookmark over on the having fun with books table that gives some strategies for you as well, besides just the sounding out strategy. Like, for example, cover the word, skip it, and then think about, okay, what would make sense there? And then hopefully they, or looking at the picture, that's kind of like K1, just looking at the first sound, or looking for a chunk, like looking for, I-N-K, pink ink. If you see that, then that's something you don't have to think about. Just cover that and try and figure out the rest of the word. So, you guys having knowledge of all this foundation stuff we're doing in school is going to help with the decoding at home. There are some words at home that are not decodable. Those are trick words, which I'm going to talk about in a moment. But also with spelling, a lot of parents ask me, how do I help my child? Like, do I tell them how to spell it or not, And, we use Writing Workshop for writing, and we do allow inventive spelling. But I know, like in my classroom, I do hold them accountable for the word study words. So if it's an AR word and they're writing car, they should be spelling that correctly because they know that from foundations. So same thing at home, like if it's spelling homework and they're trying to write a trick word, or they're trying to write a word that they have the sounds in place for, then you should try and encourage them to get it on the page. But if they're trying to write the word like afternoon and they're not going to know that yet, then just you can help them, or just let them phonetically sound it out and we'll figure it out. We're really good at reading their inventive spelling.
Right.
Yeah. But I did mention trick words, and basically what trick words are is they're the non-phonetic words, so you really can't sound them out and break them down by syllables. They're just those words you have to know. In kinder, it's like your sight words. It's the same idea. As they move into first and second, the trick words, they're expected to be able to read them, quickly and accurately, but also spell them. So I have some fun ways to spell at home, because what we don't want is we don't want the kids sitting there writing their words 20 times each, or that's not fun. So I do have a list, and this is like a one and done packet. It has all the trick words, K, 1, and 2 in here, so you can just hang on to it and have it through the years. Because that way, if your kinder students know those words, how to read, and they know how to spell them, then go on to the first grade list. It's not going to hurt the kids to push them a little bit. If they know the first grade list, words, go to the second grade words. It's not going to hurt. But there's some suggestions for just ways to keep spelling practice fun. You can pour rice in a little bin, write the words in rice. That's a good way to make it multisensory. Another thing we have the kids do is they skywrite their trick words, and the big thing is, besides just writing, is the oral piece. I'm going to write the word the in the sky, so it's T-H-E, the. So they're hearing it, and they're saying it, and they're using their large muscles, and everything's engaged. Any times you can make it hands-on and multisensory, it's better for the kids. In school, we use gel boards. Another thing that's helpful, I have some things in sheet projectors over there. Any tricks you can teach them, like the word friend. That's a hard one because the I comes before the E. You don't hear the I. So if you can say, a really good friend stays till the end. Like if you can remember that it has end, it's E-N-D, and the I comes before it. Like little tricks like that. Or like these words they all go together. They're the oh you lucky duck words, like should, could, and would. So any little tricks you can come up with. Like sometimes the kids will teach me tricks, like the word people. They're always like, it's P-apple. And I'm like, well, what do you mean? They're like, P-E-O-P-L-E, P-apple. Like that's how, that's how I remember how to spell certain words, So I have a list of just some ideas for making spelling fun at home. And then the last thing is writing, okay? And of course, spelling. I feel like whenever I talk to parents about writing, it's always like spelling. But that's like the little tiny piece. We use a workshop model where the kids plan, then they draft a piece, then they look at the piece again and they revise it, they fix it up, they try to make it better, then they edit, they look at capitalization and punctuation. So writing is a process, and it's pretty intense. So really what we want you to do at home is just keep writing fun, like Ms. Jameson was saying. Just like them sitting on your lap to read a book, you guys can write a story. What we don't want is sit down, write in your journal tonight, because then that just makes writing not fun. And writing should be a way to express yourself. So, you know, you can have, and I have some suggestions on another handout for, like, you can have like a little journal where you write notes to each other, or like, you show them how you write to-do lists, you know, like, or your shopping list, and just show them that writing is something we do to communicate, or just, you know, you could write stories together about shared experiences, like trips to places. Like I know Miss Jameson went to the circus, and
My daughter said to me the other day she doesn't like writing workshop, and I'm like, ugh. But again, it was me. I'm like at home, I'm like, write your story, like, you know. And I realized as I have to reflect on that, because when we went to the circus and we came back, I said, oh, what was your favorite part of the circus? Oh, I really like when we got the cotton candy. Oh my gosh, that's a great idea. Let's sit down together, let's write it together. And we wrote a story in like 5 minutes. And I think the other thing that's key also to tie it with the reading is like, you can write a Post-it note to your child. Like if you're reading a book together, you can jot it on a Post-it note. I really liked this page because, and you know, and then your child can write you back a Post-it note on another page. So it's like, you know, just kind of keeping it light and engaging, I think is really key. And I think Ms. Galucci brought up a good point. The spelling is critical because we want them to be able to create meaning. We want them to be able to get their ideas and their thoughts down on paper, and Foundations is a great program to help support that.
But it's not the only piece of writing. So,
Yes.
you know, you don't want to get hung up on that. And if you write a story, you could do it like you write a page, they write a page. It doesn't have to be them sitting there. Yes.
I have a son in first grade. He ever wants to write about like video games, or like, do I encourage that at home because that's what he's interested in? Like, I don't know what to do, you know?
I think it's really, yeah, I think we experience that all the time.
Yeah.
It's really hard, I think, and I'll let you guys talk to it
Yeah,
more for like
yeah.
the younger kids, but I think it's really hard for kids to do that well because they're basically then just telling. So we always try to tell them a story is about feeling, you know, so it's like, what's the heart of your story? What feeling are you trying to convey? Is it a time where you're sad? Is it a time where you're happy? Is it a special moment that you've shared? Maybe sharing a video game is really about them having fun, you know, so it's like, that's the piece that you want to kind of focus on. But I also think that there's some kids that love to have that creative outlet and have write imaginatively. We talk a lot about, you know, personal narrative, like stories about yourself, but sometimes they just don't experience a whole lot of stuff at this age. So yeah, they need to have that outlet. So I think it's a balance.
Yeah.
But
And I think it's important to know, like, it doesn't always have to be stories. Like, with the Common Core standards, you want them writing narratives, which are stories about experiences that have happened to them. You also want them to be able to have an opinion about something and write it. So it could be simply like you're gonna cook dinner. All right, maybe you have 2 kids. You convince me, like, is it pizza or pasta? Who can convince me? Who can come up with the reasons? Because that's something they need to do in school. Or like with the video games, maybe just explaining, like, you know what, you know so much about video games, you're such an expert. That's nonfiction writing. So why don't we write a video game piece, but share your knowledge, teach your younger brother, teach your friend in class about the video game, and then let's try writing a story together about the really fun day that we had at the zoo. So try to, like, you know, don't like squash it every time, like allow it, but, you know, maybe try to because it's like you said, it's really hard to turn that into like a story. I tease the kids in class, I'm like, you want to write about Minecraft, so your story's going to sound like this. I turned on the computer. I clicked the mouse. Like, I'm like, do you understand? Like, you know, it's not, you know, I got to this level. Yeah. So just getting them to, you know, understand that, you know, that is one genre of writing. Maybe you can turn it into like, oh, you're such an expert on that. You know, what else are you an expert on? You know, what else do you like to do? Like, have you read a lot of books in this series, or, you know, or sports, or even places you go on vacation? I tell the kids, like, you go to LBI, you're an LBI expert. Like, you could probably tell me where to go to dinner, or like, you know, what's the best spot on the beach, or, you know, anything like that. The big thing is just discussions.
Yeah, a lot of times in kindergarten too, a lot of what the kids are writing about kind of comes from either a book that we're sharing together as a class or an idea that we're sharing together as a class. And once they make the connection, I use a lot of visuals, once they make that connection, then it's something that they want to read more about, it's something they want to listen to more about, and they also want to write more about it. And in kindergarten, we started off doing a lot with pictures to tell the story, and we're kind of advancing beyond that, as I'm sure you've seen your child do more in 110 days than you would have imagined. And this is a great time of year for us because they're starting to turn a corner, and they're really starting to edge towards that first grade, stretching their thinking and really getting more involved in what it is that they're writing and how they're writing it. So for us, any kind of idea in kindergarten is encouraged because we just want them to be excited about writing. So we start with that, and then we kind of mold them from there. So.
And, you know, like we've said, the big takeaway tonight is just to keep it fun. So keep the word study at-home fun, play with words, or cat, how do you change cat to a different word, fat, sat, like just play, you know, it doesn't need to be sitting and writing with a pencil all the time, just keeping it fun and seeing writing. It's a big
Yes,
idea
And
of
there's
the
lots of
yeah.
stuff for you to take.
So,
Yes.
yes, there's lots of.
We'll throw
Okay.
this to Miss Moore.
And I'm going to go over math very quickly because most of what math is fun. And so what I've done tonight is prepare. Math is fun. What did I just do with my file? Oh, here we go. I've prepared a lot of games that you can take home. I have a couple of different manipulatives that you can try if you wanted to. I also have a toolkit that gives you some suggestions on resources on where you can get materials to kind of create some of the things that the kids are working with at school to support them at home. And I actually found this really interesting website. It's called What's for Dinner, go figure. But what it does is it addresses all of the different types of learning styles. And it really helps to differentiate for me so I understand, like, when I have a visual learner, what works best for them in relationship to math, or more of an auditory learner. And it kind of identifies that. So I kind of wrote up a little bit of a summary for you all so that you could just kind of get a sense of what maybe your child, what category they fit into. But what's really nice is that all of the games that I have kind of support all of those different kinds of learners. So you can't go wrong with any of them. And if you're in kindergarten and you want to take the packet for first grade, or if you're in first grade and you'd like to take the packet for second grade, just to kind of see what's coming down the pike, you're more than welcome to do that. We also have some websites in the back that you can try to help develop that fact fluency, and I do have a slide on that. Whoops, did I go backwards? What did I do?
No, you're good, one more.
Oh, that's it? Okay. Regarding the key shifts, there's a greater focus now on fewer topics. So the focus is generally on concept skills and problem solving related to addition and subtraction. So there's a lot of focus in K-2 on that fact fluency piece. The idea is that this focus will help students to get strong foundation in math and really begin to understand the parts of math that they could build upon. And Mrs. Laura being the math whiz over there, I think you would agree that it's important to build that strong foundation and that understanding of those concepts, and not just the drill and practice, to really be able to understand that relationship. And I know we do a lot of that in kindergarten, and it spirals forward moving into first and second grade. Coherence, linking things across the grades, and I think our math program and then what we do with our curriculum really helps us to be able to do that. So when one skill is mastered, it's then reviewed and taken to the next level in the next grade, and I think we do a really nice job with that in Riverview, and I'm sure in Lakeview as well, doing that and developing that for the kids. And then rigor is also one of the key shifts where we're talking more about that fundamental understanding of the concepts, speed and accuracy in their calculation, and then how to take that mathematical information and be able to apply it to real life situations. So if you, on a kindergarten level, being able to have them sort and identify and classify. So maybe you're in the supermarket and you're going down the produce aisle and you might say, okay, which are the vegetables, which are the fruits, let's count how many of each we see, or what colors do you see, or cereal, types of cereal, or something that they like to engage them in that. That's starting to build those skills for them. Fact fluency. In kindergarten, the children are expected to fluently add and subtract within 5. They need to have complete 20 problems within 1 minute by June. In first grade, it's 30 problems within 2 minutes, and that's adding and subtracting within 20. And then second grade is 60 problems within 3 minutes. So that's kind of how it builds moving forward. And all of the games and activities that we have support that. And then some of the websites that we have pulled up do that as well. We also have some suggestions for some iPad apps if anyone has an iPad at home. That could help your child with that as well. So with that, I think we have a few minutes. We can ask you to kind of get up and maybe roam around a little bit, and we can talk informally. And thank you very much for coming. We enjoyed sharing this with you.
And just so you guys know, there are
to be read to. And here's,
Great.
oh yeah,
Oh.
all the way
Fifth
up,
grade.
fifth grade, yeah.
Big.
Yes. And here's the greatest part about Read Aloud, is you can expose them to text that is above where they could get independently. And then you can have even deeper conversations. Students at the ages 3 through 5, their ability to think critically is often higher than their ability to read. It's like they can think about things that are at a higher level than what they can actually decode independently. They need the opportunity to think about what they're decoding independently, that's how they grow as readers. But engage them in those higher level conversations around a more complex text. And you can do that through reloads. Engaging in rich discussions around independent reading, that's what I was talking about before. And again, try to, as soon as it starts to feel like a quiz, that's when your child shuts off. And as soon as they shut off to reading, it's all an uphill battle from there. As teachers, a lot of what we do around reading is to make it, it's kind of like finessing the student to give you information without making it feel like they're on the spot. I know as a student what I didn't like about reading, and I did not like reading when I was young, was that something always came after. It was read this and then I'm going to give you a quiz. Read this and then you have to write an essay. Read this, and so the reading part became associated with something I didn't want to do, and so I didn't like the reading. Encourage students to be well-rounded readers. There is information in your packets about reading levels, how to find books around certain levels. There's information here about what are the key characteristics of different level books. But here's the thing, you have to get them to want to read. So if they want to read something that's a little lower than their level, if they want to read something that's higher than their level, and it's something that they can understand and enjoy, go for it. We as adults don't always read college level text because we can read it. Sometimes we like to pick up People magazine and just flip through the pages. They have that same desire to make choices. Also text variety. Nonfiction text is huge. There are certain students who are drawn to nonfiction text naturally. That's what they want to pick up. Others need to be pushed in that direction. But you know their interests, so get them books around that, and you'll see the results. Sue's going to talk for a minute about thinking aloud with students.
Okay, so this is something that probably you've done before. You probably don't even realize that you've done it. But thinking aloud is a really great strategy that you can use with your child, and we do it a lot in the classroom as well. And really, what we call it in the school is modeling. Okay, and that's when you're talking out loud to your child and explaining and talking through a process or a strategy that you use for critical thinking as a reader. So for example, if I'm reading, I'm going to use a nonfiction text for you. I was reading with students one day about surfing, and I wanted them to practice making an inference. And we were talking about how a lot of surfers surf in Hawaii, on the Hawaiian, in the Pacific Ocean by Hawaii. And I'm like, well, gee, I'm looking at my book and I'm seeing the pictures and the size of these waves are so huge. And I noticed that Hawaii has a lot of mountains and it shows the ridges. Why do you think that the waves are so high in Hawaii? I'm thinking to myself, well, gee, maybe there's mountains under the water that's creating waves that are so big that they're good for surfing. So I'm walking them through the process of making an inference, and they don't even know that you're doing it. But you're actually, rather than thinking to yourself quietly, you're expressing what your process out loud so that you're teaching them how to use that strategy themselves. And then you might say, gee, well, what do you think? You can go on to another strategy. For example, can we make a connection with this? What has we done in the past that reminds you of surfing? Where have we gone where you have seen people that play in the water that are like surfing? And we go to the shore, we go boogie boarding. So you're teaching your child and you're using thinking aloud as a process that's helping them to become a stronger reader, because they're learning how to use critical thinking strategies on their own by listening to you think aloud. Another good thing about thinking aloud strategy is that you're also reading aloud at the same time. Usually you have a book in front of you and you read an excerpt from the book to model and use as an example. So then again, just like Amy was saying, you're also modeling reading fluency for them. Like we do when we do read alouds in the classroom, there again, they're listening to you read, and they hear how well and fluently you read with expression, where you pause to think, and that's teaching them the skill at the same time that you're doing it. So it's a fabulous thing to do, and whenever you have an opportunity to spend a little time with your child, I highly recommend it, because it's really going to help them become stronger readers.
And it's the easiest thing to me to infuse, because it's kind of like, once you think about it, you're like, wait,
I teach them how to feed the fish step by step, and I'm gonna teach her how to drive when she's 16 or 17 step by step, and I teach her how to make a sandwich step by step. Like, why wouldn't I teach her how you think step by step? Because, you know, one of the most powerful things for me was that phrase, and I think you're the one who used it, was that like, thinking's invisible, like you can't see it. So how do you know it's there? Well, we do it, so we're kind of, we can't answer, that's cheating. Like, we already do it. But for a kid, like, well, I can't get in their head if I don't get them to reveal what's going on in there. And how often do I show them how I think? Because I also think invisibly. Like, it's in my head, you know, I'm driving in the car, making decisions about which way to go. And then it occurs to me to say to my 4-year-old, like, hey, do you think we should blah, blah, blah? Here's the reasons maybe we shouldn't do this. But it just doesn't occur to you. Like, it's the easiest thing that you never thought of doing, but you teach your kids it in every other possible way. And then it occurs to you like, well, duh. It's like that light bulb moment of like, oh yeah, let me just show them over and over and over again what thinking looks like or sounds like, because it usually happens silently. And how do I know that they're picking up on all my inferencing that I do? Because I don't do any of it so that they can hear it and see it and recognize it. Therefore, maybe they're not doing it. Maybe they just, who knows what they're thinking about. So it's kind of cool for me to think of that whole like, make the invisible visible. Like, and it doesn't take a lot of higher training skills to do that. It's just do what you already do, but do some of it out loud. And the kids are so able to do so much more than you might think, because you certainly know they have opinions. So like, they really are thinkers. We just maybe never made a thing of it.
And let me tell you, the first time, we do this as teachers all the time. So the first time that, let's say, one of my favorite phrases is maybe it's because. Because often students at this age think that they can't really say something if it's not right, or if they don't, you know, necessarily know, so they just don't say anything. My favorite phrase is maybe it's because it allows you to take a leap and not be right, but do your best thinking. So, for example, and you literally say this out loud. So you're watching TV, you're watching a football game. I'm wondering why everyone's wearing orange coats if this is a Green Bay Packers game and they're green and yellow, right? And then you wait for a second, because if you were actually thinking about it, you wouldn't automatically come up with an answer. You think about it. Well, maybe it's because these are fans of the other team. No, that doesn't make sense, because they're red, so why would people be wearing orange? Well, maybe it's because, right? And you come up with another, we do this as adults all the time. Students don't know that we do that, because we don't say it, you know? And so it gives them a window into what critical thinking looks like and sounds like. And the first time the child comes up to you and says, Mom, what are you cooking for dinner today? Well, I thought, we'd have tacos. Maybe it's because you didn't really feel like cooking tonight. This first time they say maybe it's because you got it. You know, it's like they got it. They have the words in their head, and they'll do it. And you'll be shocked when they come out with it. Whatever phrase it is that you choose to use.
Very quickly, I just wanted to see if I could find something that's in our handouts that you might be able to use for some ideas, is what kinds of thinking alouds you could do with your child. And if you looked at the reading literature standards that's in this packet, a lot of
That's actually at this front table.
Oh, well, you'll get these later, I'm sorry.
You're not missing it.
But if you look on the reading literature, it will give you some ideas as to what kinds of thinking aloud strategies you can try with your child, whether it be making predictions or describing a character, or, there's a lot of different ideas in here that you might want to give it a try.
Okay, shifting the way we talk about writing at home. I'm going to say that writing's tough. Writing's tough at home. Because often the students that need the most help with writing are the most reluctant writers. And getting them to write something can be a very painful and arduous process. Sometimes the students that had the biggest struggle with writing in my class, the parents would say, what should I do? Should I make them write this at home? Should I make them write this? And honestly, sometimes my advice would be, don't make them write anything. Because I have so much of a struggle getting them to write in class that if they're writing in both places, we're all doomed, because then they're going to completely shut down. So, that being said, we have to find ways to get them to write at home that don't feel like an assignment. As soon as it feels like an assignment, write about this, write about what you did today at school. It's shut down So here are some ideas to get them writing in fun ways that really are beneficial to their writing progression. Oral storytelling. Telling a story is an art, and to do it verbally is also an art. It's very difficult for a child to tell a cohesive story from start to finish without digressing into something else. This is a skill that's developed over time, but if they can't do it verbally, then they're definitely not going to be able to do it in writing. So you're sitting in the car, ask them to tell you a story, you tell them a story. They love hearing stories about what you did in your life before they were born, when you were their age, or when you were a little bit older. As teachers, we tell them stories from our lives all the time, and once again, they beg to hear them.
Especially if it makes you look bad or
Exactly.
like you're embarrassed.
The embarrassment stories.
Those are the
Those
best.
are my favorite.
Yeah, it's true.
And you'll see that when you start to do that, one of my embarrassing stories I used to tell to my students when we did personal narratives, and I would get students writing these stories, these rich stories about these embarrassing things that happened to them, you know, because they feel as though it's safe to do that. Asking them, you know, they're watching TV, they're watching a movie. Ask them to tell you what happened. Tell you the story of what happened in the show or or in the movie. They can teach their siblings how to do things. Again, procedural writing is an art form. It's one thing to know how to do something, it's another to teach somebody else how to do it. And it's another to do that in writing. They will skip huge steps. And if you make it really obvious by trying to only follow their directions, and it ends up totally not looking like what they thought it would, they'll quickly see where they have to revise that kind of work. One of the things I love having students talk about and write about is what they learned from something, but again, not in an assignment type way. So the family goes to the museum, and you pick something specific. We all know that if we say, how did school go today, they say fine, right? So if you say, tell me what you learned at the museum, they'll say stuff, right? And so you have to pick something specific. You saw they were excited about the rocket. What did you learn about the rocket? Have them tell you. Those are all types of strategies that they'll have to use when they're writing by hand. Encourage children to write about what they know and love. That's what we do as teachers. Instead of giving them necessarily a topic or an assignment, write about what you love. You know your child loves dogs, have them write a picture book about dogs, about types of dogs. You know your child loves to go to karate class, write the story of when they got their first belt. Whatever it is that they know and love, that's what you should focus on, because trying to get them to write about something else is going to be very difficult, as you know. Writing for an audience. I know that the writing that I did when I was a child was to pen pals. I had a pen pal, and I couldn't wait to get the next letter, and I would immediately be writing one back. Again, sometimes we don't think of that as like academic writing. Just like in reading, research shows that the more you write, the better you are as a writer. So any writing that you can get them to do. Now with technology, they can be emailing family members, they can be writing cards to family members, postcards to family members, anything that you can think of that for them wouldn't seem like an assignment, but they're still doing the work that writers do.
Gifts for family members.
Gifts for family members.
Yeah.
That can be a real it depends on who your child is, but for some of them, the thought of like being the one to give, grandma, brother, whoever it might be, like this gift of, I'm gonna write all about like why I love you, or I'm gonna write about the time we did this, and because it's gonna get put in a frame and it's gonna get put on the wall. And like you could also make use of like the sibling hierarchy and the, let them write to be powerful. Like let them say like, all right, we got Saturday open, like whoever convinces me the best with something reasonable to do in Morris County on a Saturday, I wanna go to Jupiter. We're gonna do it, but you have to give me, it has to be the best job of actually convincing me why we ought to do it. Like give them a job that results in them having the power to do some decision making, and suddenly they're writers.
Yes. Creative forms of writing. Poetry. Some students love to write poems because they feel like there aren't so many rules, but they're still expressing their thoughts and feelings. Making PowerPoints. Kids love to make a PowerPoint. I don't know what it is. And I just had my students, they would email them to me, and sometimes they would be a story, right? Because it's like a picture book. Here's page 1, here's page 2. And sometimes it would be all about me. right? And the first page would be, I love to swim, right? And the second page would be, I love this, right? They love that integration of technology. It's simple. You just set them up with it and watch what they come out with, and then they can present it to the whole family, send it to the teacher, send it to friends. Comics, huge, okay? In order to write a comic, you need to tell a story with a story arc. The great thing about comics is there's drawing involved. And as the students get older and older, right, in K1 and 2, drawing is an integral part of the writing process. In 3, 4, and 5, it becomes less and less of something that they do in school as far as writing is concerned. But in order to make a cohesive comic, you have to have a problem, characters, settings, dialogue. So that's something that I would recommend to my students a lot, and they loved it. They would have series, comic series that they would make together. And praising the content. It's very important to understand that your student, just like in reading, is at a certain developmental level of writing. They're not going to spell all the words correctly, and that's okay, because that's where they're at as writers. It's kind of like if you always tell them how to spell a word, it's kind of like you always tie their shoes for them. They'll never learn how to tie their shoes. So you can help them with strategies. You can ask them what strategies they use in school. You can just say, I'm able to sound it out, I hear each sound, and so that's what it is for now. Don't be concerned about editing their work, because again, that's something that's going to turn them off really fast, because then it becomes I have to be right, instead of I just need to express myself. So praise the content, it's the thinking behind it. It's the wow, this character was so exciting, wow, you really showed your emotion, wow, you really taught me something, and not focusing so much on grammar or spelling at this point.
I also noticed that because this year we got much more involved in Google Docs, you know, as a district, I was taken by surprise. We transferred many of our written responses to reading from their hard copy book to, you know, post a response on our Google Classroom, you know, interface. I am telling you, kids who I had to go and look, where's your notebook entry, it's due yesterday. They were posting like at 3:31 the day I assigned it, which means they had just enough time to get home and hop on the computer and post a response to their reading. I'm like, what's going on here? Like the only difference is I asked you to do it on a different, you know, interface, and we have the ability to see each other's and we can comment on each other, and all of a sudden that just upped the ante for them in a way that I knew they would like it, because technology's technology, the kids just tend to gravitate to it. I never expected such a buy-in to the point where I'd be getting assignments, you know, minutes after the kids got home. And good, well done, not crummy. Like, so that, I had to take a step back and say, wow, like this has more weight than I thought it would. So even just the ability to have them blogging and, you know, safely doing things that can be monitored or in a protected environment is huge for them as writers.
So some handouts and resources, and we'll go back to math for those of you who weren't here for the math part. In your packet, there's a lot of resources that you can look through and are pretty self-explanatory. There's things on reading levels and how to pick books for students. There's ways to support the shifts in the Language Arts Common Core at home. There's places to find level text. The last 2 pages, as we had mentioned before, are technology resources. They're both apps and websites. When it comes to reading and writing, here's a few good ones. Picture Book is the first one on there that's in bold. Picture Book they make storybooks. It's an app. It's super easy. They have clip art and things. They type in text, and then it reads like an ebook, like you would that you brought off Kindle. You can also share it with people. Super easy, free, and students love it. Toontastic was voted one of the best apps of something. It's a comic movie maker. And so they can move the characters, they can create their own characters. They can speak into it and narrate their comic book, or they can type into it. And then at the end, it actually plays your movie. There's a curtain that comes down, and it opens up, you can add music to it. It also talks about the story arc, and it has the students make the comic in that way. They start with the setting, then they move to this, and they have the problem and the conflict. So it's really great. There's 2 on here for you as parents. The first one that says, is your child on track, reading together to support comprehension? And then there's one a little further down, not in bold, that says on track supporting your child's writing development at home. Those are both, they're complementary, one's for reading and the other's for writing. They're put out by Heinemann, which is a company that publishes the books that come with the philosophy that we subscribe to of Workshop, the Workshop model. But what it is you pick your child's developmental age, and there's a range, and then it's all resources for you. It's questions you can ask them. It's ways you can model. There's videos that show people interacting with kids and things to say and how to go about it. There's student samples, so you can see about what their writing should look like, what they should be able to produce, how they should be able to read. It's really fantastic. There's even like activities that you can do with them and things that come across a little assignment-y, but it's up to you. It's a really great resource, and it's spot on with what we do here at school. So that's a great resource for you. Those are, the first one is Your Child on Track. That one's free, it's reading, and then a little bit farther down is On Track Supporting Your Child's Writing Development. That one's $1.99, but they're local. Okay, so for those of you who have been here for the duration and are ready for the other resources, if you want to come up to our resource buffet, we have by grade level some resources, and you can also grab at the ends of your table kind of the resources for all grade levels. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
If you'd like to stay for some math, you're more than welcome to.
Who's in for round 2? Come on.
No,
I know somebody wants to hear it again.
That was really nice, actually, very enjoyable.
Oh, good.
Thank you very much.
Oh, sure, thanks for coming.
Thank
This
you.
is kind of a lousy night to come out, but
No.
all of the nights are lousy to come
Yeah.
out.
It's always good for us too, to kind of just get a sense of.
Can't wait tomorrow.
Oh, I know, but it's getting less and less
Yeah.
ominous, I feel like.
Over the weekend, it's nice. It's getting
Yeah,
better.
it's supposed to be almost
40s.
50 now.
Yeah.
Like real March.
Just turn it to ice.
Yeah, one last one.
Are we gonna get Estelle to stop writing? She's the most I do is like, she is awesome. It's so funny.
Whatever the outcomes are,
Mhm.
Writing, if there's another, if there's
does
Maybe
that
a
have
delay,
any
but
bearing on the
I
marks
don't know.
the kids have in the regular school? Or
No.
No bearing, right?
No, definitely not. So that's one thing you don't need to be worried about,
Yes, thank you.
but no.
Yeah.
Would you like to talk some math?
Sure, we'll talk some math. So, we can spare you the skip from the first time around.
Yeah, although.
Since I lost my accomplice, as it
Pretty
were. You wanna be my student?
Would you like to?
I would like you.
Okay.
So what we started out with was a vision of maybe what math can be like when you're at your house at night with your child, as the parent who probably worked all day and, you know, has any number of other children / pets / household duties, spouses, whatever the case might be, and you're beat, you're tired, and you really want to help your child the best you can, but everything else sort of comes in and creates a perfect storm. And math, you know, the reality is homework table often ends up looking like this at 8:30 at night. Okay, honey, how's your math going? You just about done there? We got a few things to do before bedtime.
It's going okay. I don't know how to do number 6 though.
Number 6, okay. Oh boy, yeah, fractions, oh, better you than me. Yeah, don't stress too much though. I was not good at math as a kid, so, you know, it happens. We're related. So, let's hear like, what are you doing here? Reducing? Equivalence? What are you doing?
Fractions.
Fractions, okay. Oh, I remember this. Okay, it's gonna be all right. So, here we go. We have to make an equivalent fraction. I see, oh yeah, look at the directions there. All right, so basically, remember that whole thing about how you have to find a new fraction that equals the old one? We talked about that before, right? You did that in 4th grade a little bit?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so what I would do here, wouldn't you say like 8 goes into something and you think there's something 8 goes into, right? Like what, like 16? Yeah, okay, so 8 into 16 goes twice, so then 3 has to go twice into some new mystery number, right? So 8 times 2 is 16, 3 times 2 is? 6, right? Okay, make sense?
Yeah, I
Okay.
got it.
Okay, cool. Brush your teeth and don't forget to kiss Daddy. And that may not be unlike what a little math experience could be like. Then there's the teacher version of me that sits home at night and thinks about how I hope a family can cope with homework and make their way through the nightly routine of everything that has to get done in a way that's not stressful for everybody, that is helpful for the child, that is manageable for a parent, and that overall goes to developing, you know, the child's skills and attitudes for the greater good. So then that situation in my head might look a little more like, oh, all right, honey, it looks like you're just about done with your math page for tonight. Great. Any issues there? Are we good?
I'm not sure about how to do this.
All right. Okay. So it looks like you did the most of the page though, right?
Yeah.
Is just number 6 giving you a problem right now?
Yeah, I don't know what to do.
What have you done so far? Have you even started?
Yeah, well, I was thinking that maybe I should, I don't know, multiply them by
Multiply
something?
them. Multiply them.
Yeah, the top, and this, the top and the bottom.
Oh, the top and the bottom number. Okay. What would and why would you want to multiply? What's something's telling you to multiply? What do you think it would?
Well, I think I remember my teacher saying that, if you want to make an equivalent fraction, you have to like do the same thing to the top and the bottom.
Oh, okay. So you got to do some. There's some kind of system here.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds a little familiar to me too. Tell you what, for the moment, don't worry about this problem. Walk me through one of the ones that you felt good about, that you feel like you did the right way.
Well, I think I did well with number 4.
Okay, so what made number 4 go so well? What did that feel good for you?
Well, I had 1/2,
Okay.
and so I made it 3/6 because I know that 3 is half of 6.
Ooh, interesting. So you knew that 3 was half of 6, and that's how you knew that it was the same as 1 being half of 2? Does that work for this one? Does that help you get any closer?
I don't know what 3/8 of anything is. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, 3/8 is not as familiar as 1/2, is it? Okay. Was there any other way you could have thought about 1/2 going to 3/6, or was it just because you happened to know that 3 was half of 6 and 1 was half of 2?
Well, my teacher said to do the same thing to the top and the bottom, so if you take 3 and you multiply 1 by 3, then you get 3, and if you take 3 and you multiply it by 2, you get 6.
So what's different about what you just said to me is, it sounded like at first you were thinking all about how the top of the fraction gets to the bottom of the fraction, and what you just did you even realize you just thought from the left to the right instead of top to bottom? I think you just found a connection from left to right, not just from top to bottom. Can you do anything with this from left to right? Is there some sort of connection
So what
of
if I
getting from one to the
multiply
other?
this top and bottom by 3,
Okay.
like I did with that, and then I'll get 9/24?
Does work out that way, doesn't it? What do you think? 50-50? Are you pretty sure about that, or
Well,
not
that
sure?
seems like it works.
Seems like it works. Well, I'm impressed by your thinking. You certainly have good reasons for what you're saying. So let's see what Mrs. Higglybottom says tomorrow. And you know what? What's different about those two conversations, maybe first and foremost in your family life, is you don't walk away angry and frustrated. Because school aside, that is the worst. It is the worst feeling at 8 o'clock at night when you haven't seen each other a lot all day anyway. You don't want to walk away with animosity and stress. So a couple things that, as a teacher, the things that I sort of had the power to morph in my mind were I had a different sort of attitude that I conveyed to my kid as the parent. Because one of the first things I said to my daughter was, oh, I was bad at this too, please don't feel bad, honey. Sort of, because I don't want her to be stressed, I feel badly for her, I do remember that math was a bear for me, but what I just did was I reinforced the fact that, yeah, this math stinks, or this math is hard, and I made it okay for her to give up. Because I said, yeah, I was bad at this too, which is a signal for, okay, so you can stop, and we can agree to hate math together. You don't want to do that, even if that really is how you felt about math. I felt that way about math as a kid. What you would like is to have a part in cultivating a more receptive disposition to math. But the way you do that is not by fighting a battle of interlocking horns every night at 8 o'clock over a workbook page. So as a parent, when you sometimes don't feel like you have power to, help them, either A, because I'm too tired, B, because I don't even remember how to add fractions or whatever it is we're doing in math, Or C, because my child is so frustrated, I can't talk to them, we're too close, it has to, get the tutor, get the somebody, get your brother, get Uncle so-and-so. You sort of want to try to stay away from engaging in that kind of like emotional conflict, and math seems to breed that more than any other subject, or maybe it's just because it did in my house, it always ended in tears and stomping. But I think the difference between the way adults now grew up with math and the way kids now are being introduced to math is different. And when parents aren't in school, so they know what they did for math, they're trying to make the best connection they can between what they see their child coming home with and what they know they did in school and what math was in school. And the truth is, in terms of math is still math. It hasn't changed a whole heck of a lot in terms of, all the things that were mathematical then are mathematical now, but what's different is the way we're wanting students to think about math and the way we want them to think mathematically as an underpinning of everything that happens as we teach them skills and concepts throughout the grades in school. So you probably, as a parent, might feel that pressure of like, I can't send this workbook page back with all these mistakes, they're gonna think I didn't help her. Or are we at time? Okay. However, if what you're doing is not so much worrying about the right answer, because then that's what we're there for, we can do recon on that kind of stuff. If what you can do is sort of create the atmosphere of, yeah, math is just kind of a part of life, just like, sometimes I read, sometimes I this, sometimes I go to the grocery store and keep track of my bill, that's math. If you can sort of help foster that attitude in them, it makes them so much more ready to learn when they come to us, and then we can do that piece of the work. And the truth is, if you help them think a little bit, just like we were talking about with reading, if you help them learn to think out loud by you thinking out loud, and then you can share how you're thinking, the right answer becomes sort of, oh yeah, if it happens to be right, then fine. But what I want is to prove to you, A, that you were thinking even though you didn't realize you were, and B, maybe I can learn how you tick and maybe you can learn a little from how I tick, and we can learn how to think like we're mathematicians. Right answers aside. And the more you can do at home to foster that kind of thinking, and it comes in the form of games, it comes in the form of let them correct you sometimes. Instead of, oh, number 6 I don't understand, how about, oh, number 3, I realize how you do that. I think you're wrong, honey. Wouldn't it be this? And let them say no, and let them put their hands on their hips and get indignant and tell you why you're wrong. Because nothing makes them happier right now. They have a little power. And you just trick them. You trick them into thinking without saying, let's sit down and do 6 more problems. So if you approach it from that kind of a viewpoint, and you try to infuse some sort of mathematical thinking, some patterning, some games that are not necessarily, oh, but she's learning about fractions, I shouldn't play this other game because that's not going to help her do fractions. It is going to. It's not a direct cause and effect that if you do this game tonight that has dice and operation signs, tomorrow she'll be able to reduce fractions, but it actually will eventually become that because what you're doing is really building up a really solid foundation for them as I'm a mathematical thinker. Fractions will come and fractions will go, and then eventually it'll be polynomials when I get to middle school, and then we'll be doing trigonometry, but it doesn't matter what it is because I think in math. And they won't even realize that's happening. So if your homework approach even changes, that one little tweak of, let me start approaching him and letting him control the homework review. Let him teach me. Let him show me where I made my mistake. You'll do wonders far more than sitting and kind of feeding them the answers so you can sleep at night and feel better because the teacher won't think you didn't know how to reduce that fraction the next day. So it's just a nice way to start thinking about math. There's a couple, cutting myself short, there's a couple resources. They were already on the tables. This is kind of just jumping off point for the types of games, think restaurant placemats. The types of games that are quick, they don't take a lot of supplies, if any, and they really foster pattern thinking, systems thinking, and you can do them quickly and without making it seem like, okay kids, we're having a math night, and they all scatter in different directions before you can grab them by their coat. And it's neat because then they start to not see math as like this other thing that they make me do before bed. It just becomes part of what it is. So if you can create that, you'll have got won half the battle, and you'll see the changes that come as a result of that, and hopefully have a happier home life. So I'm cutting myself off here because I have to.
Yeah, we
I got the
have,
gong.
if you have not gotten the resources up front by grade level, those are available, and also ELA, math, and writing activities, prompts and things in the packet. So thank you so much for coming. We really appreciate you coming out tonight, braving the traffic and the weather.